Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and today I'm sitting here with Brad Hunt.
Yep.
We're going to sit and talk about elk calling today, right?
Yeah, should be good.
Brad's been on here talking about elk before. He's killed a lot of elk. He's got a lot of elk hunting experience and calling experience as you've competed in the World Elk Calling Championships.
Yeah. Yep.
Haven't won yet.
No, I'm hoping that's in the near future.
But you have competed.
But I have competed with Jason Phelps, Dirk, Corey Jacobson.
Yeah.
Ended up finishing fourth. We talked about it in another podcast, but finished fourth last year in the world. So
Fourth, folks. Fourth in the world.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet, man.
It's getting competitive. There's some great callers, man. It's fun because there are some really, really good callers.
Yeah.
And it's so subjective too. Like, you never know. You can sound amazing and to yourself, and you may not even place. But
right. I mean, it's sort of like ice skating, gymnastics. Yeah. See, in basketball, if you score the basket,
right, you win.
You win. In football, you get the touchdown. Whoever gets the most wins.
And I'm more of that type of guy.
Right, like there's no question.
And so the last couple of years that I've been doing this, it's been tough to get used to because I'm like, into those. But
if you watch
sports.
like figure skating, which can't really say I do much of, but
that's a lie.
Or gymnastics,
that is a lie. No.
If you watch this stuff, it comes down to the judges judging you.
Yeah.
One judge might be impressed with some of the things you do, and one might not, and then they raise the score, and it's like 8.5, 9, 10.
Yep.
It's like
just so subjective.
Yeah.
Just like elk calling.
Yeah.
But in a way, I've kind of figured out competition calling and my elk calling as far as in the wild.
Yep.
They're similar, but they're nowhere near the same. I mean, in a way.
Yeah.
You always really focus on crisp, clean, clear, and it may hurt you or it may help you in the competition, but it's just something I've tried to focus on, I guess.
Well, I figure since you're number 4 in the world, we should pick your brain and figure out a little bit about calling. So that's what today's interview is going to be about. Before we get started, folks, I want to remind you. So, Brad, tell me about this. A lot of guys, want to become really talented elk callers. Right. And I still run across tons of guys who don't know how to use a diaphragm.
And I think there is can be a little bit of an intimidation factor there because it is hard to find the correct read for you, because there are so many different latex stretches and stuff like that, whether it's an experienced elk call or a harder one to use versus a very light stretch beginner call, which it's hard for me sometimes to teach people because I have been able to use the advanced calls, but you just got to think about, it's all about, we'll kind of go over 3 things, but it's all about putting the diaphragm in your mouth correctly, your air pressure correctly, and then learning to control your tongue and your pressures on that diaphragm.
Okay.
And so that's the biggest thing is just figuring out the diaphragm that works for you and practice with it. Tons and tons. If you're in the car by yourself, vehicle driving.
Is that where you like to do it the most?
That keeps me awake while I'm driving on the road a lot, and I'll just throw it in and knock it out, And I basically taught myself as a kid growing up, A lot of time sitting in a swather or tractor or throw one in.
What's a swather?
Cuts hay.
Nice.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
Farm kid.
So, I've said the same thing. Everybody's mouth is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Everybody's mouth is different size, different whatever.
Yep.
Just like your tiny head. And so.
Well, it's all kind of how your palate is shaped too. So I have a little narrower palate. And so like a large frame, a big diaphragm.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit as well. And I can't get that ceiling.
Who makes a big, what are you talking about? Like a big frame?
So these ones with Phelps, they're all pretty much the same frame, and they're more of like a medium-sized frame.
Yeah.
And this is what I use as the Phelps game calls. But there's tons of different calls out there. And back in the day, I haven't really ran into it as much now, but back in the day, you used to have like a small frame, medium frame, and a large frame with your flat diaphragms. It didn't have like a dome on them or anything.
Okay.
And so like these ones, you can see they've got the dome on top.
Right.
But the other ones, like a large frame, I struggled to get the seal on that diaphragm. And so I'd get blow by with that diaphragm.
And what you're saying is when you put the diaphragm in your mouth,
I couldn't seal that.
When you blow on the diaphragm, you don't want any air escaping around it. So that's what this whole plate is for.
Yep, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So you can get a seal, and then all the air that you blow, because sometimes the guy will put it in the mouth and it'll go like this.
Yep. And you'll get that blow by.
And you hear all that air coming out around it. You want all that air controlled and going right up against the
and you want to be able to control that air with how much you're blowing out of not really necessarily from your lungs, because it's more coming. You're like your diaphragm. Your diaphragm. You're kind of directing it more in just one area or one direction, and so you want to control that with your pressures of your tongue. So when you lay your diaphragm on, and we'll start pretty basic. Most tapes are rounded like this. Actually, all tapes are, and your latex, the flat side, will face forward toward your lips. The round part of the tape will go to the back of your throat, and then just get it comfortable on your tongue. You don't want to go to the very back of your tongue because you don't have as much control with that, because it is such a strong muscle back there. You don't want to go too far forward on your tongue, because then you'll get the tickle. Yeah, it's like you can put it in and then just
kind of play around
with it where it gets comfortable. And so I put mine a little further back than normal or most guys, but that's where I'm comfortable and where I have the most control on my diaphragm.
Right.
Yep. So
how did you figure that out?
Time with the diaphragm, and trying different ones.
Okay.
And this is the gray with Phelps, and it's more of kind of you can get really good cow sounds out of it. You can get great bugle sounds, but it's not a super easy call, and it's not a real hard call to use.
Kind of the jack of all trades.
Exactly. Exactly.
And good for someone who's trying to learn.
Yes. Yep. And I always recommend you get, and Jason will say the same thing, get 2 calls. If you're trying out, get, for example, their orange or their black, which are very, very easy to use.
Really soft latex.
Really soft, and easy to blow and not really controlling. Like with the orange, you don't want to bugle with that because it's such a light latex that it'll wear out quick. So I would kind of recommend getting the black, which is still pretty easy, and then going the gray, and then you can see which one you can use easier.
Right.
And then you can, once you get better at that, controlling your sounds and stuff, then you can work on going with a more advanced call, Yeah. It's just time practicing with the call.
Okay. So let's say somebody's trying to, we'll talk a little bit about somebody who's trying to learn for the first time or really do this. And then later in the show, I want to get into, okay, let's say you have lots of experience.
Right.
How can a guy go to the next level of calling? Because it's kind of where I'm at, I'm pretty proficient at most of the calling.
Right.
But how do I go into
that next level?
Next level, yeah. So starting with a new guy, okay, what sound do you think a guy should work on at first? Like, what's the first thing? You have somebody like your wife, she's never done this before, and you're going to, teach her
and I've heard a lot of different people say it, but try and make that mosquito noise. You don't want your sound going up and down. You don't want it to break over. You just want a consistent mosquito noise. Control it, but just work on making sound with your diaphragm. So here's...
Yeah.
And so what you'll do is... Once you get that, and you can hear there's no air blow by there.
Yeah.
And if you're getting blow by, play with the diaphragm. Work it back, work it forward. And if you get to that point and you notice that there's a bunch of blow by, you can even, once you kind of get your diaphragm fitted to your mouth, some guys will cut that tape.
Yeah.
You can cut this down clear to the metal frame, but you just want it to seal up in your mouth.
I've heard some people say you should make the shh.
Yeah, or guys
sound.
Will say hiss.
Like shh,
yep.
Shh, like shh, be quiet,
yep.
Shh,
yep.
with the diaphragm in your mouth.
Shh.
And it kind of sounds like
the
this.
one sound I want people to stay away from, because this is back in the day, you used to hear it all the time. People would say, make the EO. You don't want to make that sound.
EO.
Because what you're doing is it's not a natural.
What's the EO sound?
So guys used to go. And it kind of you can make it's hard
is that
for
like
me.
EO with your mouth,
like EO, and you don't want to make
okay.
that O with your lips, because that wasn't a very good example. But you'll get more of a unnatural cow sound.
Okay.
Versus when you start saying hiss, what that hiss does, or sh, that S. It's mainly the S is putting your tongue where it needs to be to get a seal on that diaphragm, And then you start controlling your air and stuff like that going through it.
Because when I have someone go shh, shh with the diaphragm in,
you're pushing your tongue pressure up. Yep.
A lot of times they can just make that sound right off the bat, and they're like, "Oh wow, I did it."
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. And the big thing is just finding that comfortable spot in your mouth, up against your palate and with your tongue.
You know what's funny is if you've grown up in the East Coast, pretty much, you've hunted turkeys, and so just about everybody and their dog can uses these to make sounds to call a turkey. Yep. But if you're out west, and our turkey hunting is becoming bigger and bigger out west for sure, and there's more turkeys. I remember when I was a kid, I never saw a turkey.
Right.
There were no turkeys.
I know where I grew up, there was no turkeys. That's for sure.
And now they're everywhere. Like everywhere I go, I find turkeys now.
Yeah.
And so if you do, at least you're comfortable with putting a diaphragm in your mouth and then figuring it out.
Yep.
But if you're not, this is some good information right here.
And so I'll kind of go back to pretend your finger is your tongue here. What you want to do is that diaphragm's going to lay there. Whether it's you don't want it clear back here because, like I said, that muscle's so strong you're not going to have much control.
Yep.
With the tip, it's so sensitive.
So for folks that are listening, you basically are putting the middle of your tongue
about the middle of your tongue
up against
forward
the latex,
or back,
a little bit
depending.
up toward the latex.
Yep.
You're not using the tip of your tongue or the back of your tongue.
Right, and that's all that's going to cause the sound is that vibration.
Again, when you go shh, with it kind of in there,
you feel that pressure of the S going up against the latex.
You'll feel it. Like some people, though, my cousin Benny, he has this thing like up against his front teeth.
Yeah,
like it's up front, and then I have people like you that have it really far back.
See, I don't go super far back, but at the same time, when you get it really far forward, like those watching, if it's really far forward, the muscle on the tip of your tongue is almost not enough. So you don't have a lot of control. And for newer callers, it'll tickle their tongue.
Right.
And then if they get it real far back, they'll get that gag effect, and a lot of guys will get. But just kind of.
I never understood that. I had some buddies that they just put this in their mouth. They're like,
you're right.
I'm like, you big weenie.
Yeah. Or once we get into more advanced, like trying to do a chuckle or something, they'll suck it in.
Yeah.
But so all you're doing is just putting it in the middle of your tongue there, and then just your pressure of your tongue, and that's all that's controlling it. Is that latex? Is the vibration of the air going across that latex?
All right.
So, and then
once they can make that sound, then what?
I would just focus on. Don't worry about trying to make cow-calf sounds. Go from getting sounds out, getting a good seal on your diaphragm, and then start working on controlling sounds. The mosquito sound, and then once you get that steady, constant mosquito kind of sound, then you can start playing with it, going from a low octave to a high octave, and then controlling that from going that high pitch to a lower and back down, So
do that for me. You look like a ventriloquist over there. Like
kind of a puppet.
How come your lips aren't moving?
I actually have very little lip movement on any of my calls.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll get a little bit here and there, but I don't exaggerate. Like some guys will really try and exaggerate that.
Ben does that.
Yeah, and Ben. Same with like the EO. And yeah.
He's like moving it around it big time. Yeah.
I don't have a lot of movement with my lips and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, I don't either.
But just work on controlling those sounds, going high to low, and not getting the air blow by and not breaking that call over. Because once you're breaking that call over, then you don't have the control.
What do you mean breaking it over?
So you'll get sounds. I don't know if I can do it. It's kind of hard. You're not able to control going from that lower to higher pitch, So
what you're saying is you don't have a steady increase in pitch that's controlled. Right. Exactly. You just skip levels and go straight to...
And what you just want to really focus on is not getting that air blow by, getting a good seal, getting a good sound out, and then all I'm doing is I'm not necessarily pushing any more air out. I'm not pushing hardly any air out, but I'm just taking the pressure of my tongue and putting more pressure to get that higher pitch sound out of there. Once you get past that point, you get to being able to make those sounds. Then you can start working on, and you've got kind of the control from the low pitch to the high pitch.
Yep.
Then you can start messing around with dropping that high pitch sound off. So it sounds something like this. then it starts sounding a little more like a cow call.
Yep.
And you work on that. And then once you get past that point, then you can start slowing it down and actually doing more of calf sounds. But we'll continue with cow sounds. And all I'm doing is controlling the drop off of my tongue. Mm-hmm. So I get to that high spot and then I'll drop it off. So just basically like a basic cow mew.
For the higher pitch, there's more pressure on the tongue, and
Yep.
then the tongue reduces
Right.
pressure.
And then once
to
you
drop.
get past that point, then you can start doing the jaw drop or the cheek tighten, things like that to kind of get your, because there's a ton of different elk sounds, you know?
Yeah.
And you can work on those, but one step at a time. Just
Right.
learning to control it, making good sounds. Then once you get that basically perfected, then move on to the next sound, you know? And then, so now you can do calf sounds. And with calf sounds, you're not really going to have much of a drop off. They're pretty, just a little bit. So you can, then once you get there, you can do a cow and a calf communication. So you can kind of hear the difference of the two. And,
Right.
And I will do that a lot in the field, you know.
Yep.
And then once you get more advanced, you'll make, and you've heard it, you start getting to where you don't sound just like one cow or one calf. You sound like
I heard
multiple cows
Yep.
and calves, you know.
Yep.
So
Yeah. The cow and the calf sounds. I mean, one thing that I always like to do, especially as we get closer to season, is just plug in an audio of some kind
right.
of a herd of elk, and then just grab my diaphragm and just start
Right. And I'm glad
singing along with them.
Yep, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the best things you can do, whether it's live elk or watching somebody that had videoed live elk or something, is listen to their sounds and go back and just try and mimic that exact sound.
Yeah.
Because it will benefit you well. And then it goes back to don't try and start doing that too early, you know? Mm-hmm. Get your basic steps. Because once you figure out the basic kind of 3 steps of a diaphragm, then it becomes pretty easy to really get those good sounds out that you want.
Yeah.
You know, and just not moving forward before you're ready.
Okay.
But
Yep, makes sense. So, okay, so we've got the cow. We worked on the calf sounds.
Yep.
Then what?
so you can, and we're going pretty quick here.
Right.
But you can go, now you can start getting into kind of your bugle sounds and things like that. And same thing is going back to the mosquito. You know, just ramp it up basically and
Show me.
then you can start dropping it off, and then you can also start adding some voice into that.
Okay.
So like a location bugle is more of you want to hit, and people kind of ask sometimes how high of a note or lower note of a note you want to get. And on a location bugle, I mean, that's what you're doing is you want that elk to hear you when he's far away
Right.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing is you're getting pretty high, you know, high pitched, almost to the point where if somebody's standing next to you, they don't want to stand next to you, you know?
Yeah.
You're getting up to that high note. And a location bugle, I kind of cut it off early with that high pitched bugle. You'll bugle, get it high, and then you kind of just drop it off because, you know, you want to hear
Yeah.
an elk.
Yeah.
Versus
I've
if I'm
noticed-
in close, you know.
You're kind of like shot gobbling an elk, you know, in the
exactly.
afternoon.
Yep.
And you get a guy that really loves to hear himself bugle.
Yeah.
And he's just like, and he's going on and on and on. And the other elk are now like impulsively responding,
I didn't hear it.
but you couldn't hear it because he didn't shut up.
Yeah, yep.
So,
And that's a big thing is with those location bugles, it's a little bit longer sometimes, but at the high, once you hit that high pitched note, you drop it off pretty quick. You cut it off.
show me, let us hear that.
And you don't always, I don't put a lot of emphasis in the oof at the end of it, you know, like I would basically a grunt or a challenge bugle,
Okay.
you know. So challenge bugle, then you want to start putting a lot more voice and kind of your in your chest, you kind of your diaphragm, you know.
Okay. Show me do a location and then follow it up with a challenge bugle.
Okay. And so I get some more growl, and you don't hear it as much without a bugle tube because
Right.
the bugle tube gives you that back pressure.
Right.
But what you're doing is with that location bugle, I don't have a lot of growl at the beginning of it, a little bit, but you're not like with the challenge bugle. You're really getting that deep growl, kind of bringing it up, and then a loud like, oof, you know, kind of like pumping your chest up type thing.
Okay.
But yeah, with your location bugles, just hitting that high note, somewhat a little longer than like a challenge bugle, I feel.
Yep.
But then cutting it off.
How do you like? I have trouble hitting the really, really high notes. Like Dirk is super good at those.
Right.
Where he hits that high note where it just sounds like that's so high. It's so unique that it's not the sound that a lot of other callers can make.
Right.
Same thing with Corey Jacobson. It's so perfect without any flaws that you're like, was that a hunter or was that a elk?
Yeah.
There's no way to tell.
Right.
You know?
And what I've really worked on. So with, for example, like with the gray, Jason's, the pink, and with Dirk's, the Maverick, I can't quite get them as high as I want. For me, because I don't know if I don't have as big as lungs as Jason or whatever, I can't get it that high. So what I love Charlie's, his double reed and his new single reed, but it's a really heavy reed.
Right.
And with that, it allows me to be more vocal. And
there's a couple of calls that I can use that'll get me that sound real close to it. The gray Phelps, I can't quite do that. But what I like about the gray Phelps is it's a jack of all trades.
Right.
So when I'm in the moment and all that, I can cow call, calf call, bugle. I can do it all with the one reed.
Yep.
I might make some compromises like with that high pitched sound, but I don't necessarily need it when
you're in close.
You already
know where they're at.
I'm already working them.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, and so that's what I've noticed is like even in my competition calling and stuff like that or location bugles, I always use a really heavy latex or even the double reed that Charlie has with his signature.
That's tough to do cow calls on.
A lot of guys can't.
Because what happens is when you have a reed that is that tough, you end up with a really harsh cow call.
Yeah.
So it's hard to do those soft, sultry, sexy sounds.
Yeah.
You know, that a cow might make. Just it's more of an urgent cow call is what you end up with.
Right.
So I'm swapping reeds like.
Yeah. So this one, it's hard to see, but that one is a double reed. It's the only double reed, double latex that Phelps offers. But now Charlie just came out with a new one. It's a single reed, but still really heavy. And I can cow call with them a few times, but
yeah, let's hear it.
But it's like a real mature call. And this is the new one with the single reed that he has.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's clean, super clean.
They're deep.
So,
but a lot of guys can't do that.
And then you can bugle with that.
Yeah, and it's like the best one I can lip ball with. I can get that deep bugle, loud bugle because it is heavy for me.
Yeah.
And it being heavier, I have to put a little more air, but that allows me to hit that high note versus where I can't sometimes quite get there with a different reed.
Well, and everybody's a little different because some guys need a really soft reed,
right? And
they just finesse it, and they can get that high note.
Yep.
I've tried. I have to have a reed that's super tight, and I got to just slam on it, and that gets me up there.
Right.
But I'm probably muscling it instead of using technique.
When you get into a lot of those lower but they're tighter reeds, they. Depending where you're at, but like your lower end ones that we talked about, like the orange, the black, they'll get you that high note, but they're not. They're like a really small bull sound, you know.
Okay.
They don't have like that deep grunt. They're just hard to grunt with.
All right.
Things like that.
All right. So do another challenge bugle. How does a guy learn the challenge bugle?
So kind of start off. You can work on kind of in your voice without a diaphragm, doing the grr. You're kind of dropping your throat, basically, you know. So, and then at the end, you can kind of, like you're getting punched in the gut type thing, you know. And that's where you'll get into your grunts and things like that. It's
right,
more in that diaphragm, your gut.
Okay. What's the deal with this pitch black?
So I love that one, and actually that that particular reed before
It's a Phelps reed, pitch black.
It's a Phelps pitch black. That's the number 2. So they used to come in a 3-pack, and that's all they were. But now they do have them individually.
Okay.
So like your 1 is more of kind of like I think it's around probably the black, maybe gray diaphragm. Kind of an all around. The number 2 is more between Jason and Dirk's, the Maverick and the Phelps pink, a little heavier. And that number 2, basically for about 4 or 5 months, twice a week, I would hammer that thing for about 1 to 2 hours driving by myself.
Yeah.
And after about 4 or 5 months, I finally got it to where it won't hold a high pitched bugle. So it lasted a long time. Okay. And that's one of my favorite reeds. That's like my go-to all-around reed.
Okay.
But it is, like you were talking, it's a little
still
tougher.
Tough for me to use. I need some time behind it,
right.
I think.
Yep. Like that one being a brand new reed, I always tell guys, like, breaking a reed by hammer, like a harder reed like that, break it in by just hammering it like 6 or 8 times with a bugle.
Yeah.
Then it'll loosen up a little bit. Then you can kind of get those cow sounds and get a little more familiar with it.
Do you often growl into the high pitch, or do you just start off with the high pitch and come down?
No, I'll put a little bit in there, but it depends. I mean, because you can kind of, everybody's different,
Like if I do it with this reed.
Yeah.
How do I, it's a little harder to pop off of it.
Yep.
Than some.
Being the thicker latex is what it is.
Because I really like the bugling bull.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's a single latex.
Yep.
But it's tight.
Yeah.
And I'm able to control that better than any other reed for bugling.
Right.
But the gray one is kind of my next go-to.
And that's why I'm kind of using this one, because it's an all-around.
That's what I was going to say is a lot of times I need to be able to cow call and bugle.
Yeah.
I'm stuck with just the one if I use.
Right. Seeing like where I'm at, I can. The pitch black, I can use both with. Yeah. And this is brand new, so I haven't. I literally just pulled this out of the package, but
yeah.
So I really like I said, this is my go-to call. And then if I really have to do a location bugle, I'll grab Charlie's, put the purple in, just to get that.
Because I got good at the bugling bull. I got good at the Elk 101, the orange one. But I like the gray. I like the black Phelps.
So another one, too, that's kind of in between the black Phelps and the gray is the green. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty good all around.
Yep.
And it's kind of like that same jack of all trades, but it's just not quite as heavy as the gray.
Yeah.
But you still can do your cow calf sounds, get into your bull sounds. They're just not as big sounding, I guess you'd say, but still a great all around. And that's why I always recommend people with a lot of times like the black and the gray. It's because, if the gray is too easy for you, the black is too easy for you, then I like the gray, or too soft. I can go with the gray, or if that one's like the black's too easy, the gray's a little harder, you might go with the green, which is in between.
Okay.
But
so what do you find like elk respond to? Like what is a couple of call combinations that you like to use?
It depends, because you get into that later rut, and they answer to a lot. Where if you're early rut, things like that, sometimes just some easy cow-calf mews, talk back and forth, light stuff.
Yeah.
It will get them to pipe off. Same with like location bugles and stuff, but just some basic talking is. And then you can get into the estrus and things like that. And you heard that too. And where I had the plastic reed diaphragm.
External reed.
Or external reed and a diaphragm. I put the diaphragm in and leave it in.
Yeah.
And I will use both of those pretty much one right after another and sound like two cows fighting or whatever you want to do,
Well, that worked.
Yeah.
What's that sound like? I mean, you don't have an external reed here, but.
So for like an Estrus Call,
Yeah.
you know, and it's more of a really high pitched kind of that what guys will call an estrus, and that's what the reeded call is. The plastic reed is an easy estrus call, and you
Right.
get that really whiny.
You'll do both at the same time.
Yep, I'll get it going back and forth, and throw some calf sounds in there, and even some light music with it all going on. So
You'll get them amped up doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what do you do with the bugles?
If I'm in close and what people will call a challenge bugle, which I don't do a lot. I mean, there's certain situations, but I haven't done a lot of that because I'm hunting mostly open country.
Right.
But where we were hunting in that deep timber and stuff like that,
Yeah, the thick
once
country.
those bulls get fired up,
Yeah.
then you can like, all right, I want to start.
It's like the
challenging.
Oregon coast.
Yeah.
They can't see 20 feet.
Right.
So you can make them think there's a real elk there. And if they're going to find out if there's an elk there, they have to come.
And that's where
into
you'll
an
get
opening.
into when those suckers get fired up and they're
In an open country, they can see you at 180 yards
or
100 yards.
2 miles away. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, it doesn't do you a lot of good to
Right.
call like that.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times those bulls, especially your bigger herd bulls, they'll scream their heads off.
Yep.
But the whole time they're walking away with their cows.
There's no need to walk all the way over. First of all, they're as lazy as we are.
Right,
You know?
exactly.
Why am I going to walk over there?
Yep.
You know,
Once you get in real close, maybe get in some patches
Yeah.
of trees and stuff, then you change your game. You can do those challenge bugles and things. But dark timber country, you're wanting them to come to you. A lot of times you'll get to where that bull will pipe off, and when he's being aggressive, and you'll cut him off
yeah,
and fire right back
That's
with a deep.
that's what
bugle,
I
you
love
know?
to do.
Yeah, and everybody loves that.
yeah, cut them off. It seems to set them off.
Yep, and that's the key is like when you cut them off and they want to play, then that's what gets them excited.
Yeah.
And they kind of have that challenge, want to come in and fight.
What do you think about suspense? Like Lampers, he'll irritate the hell out of a bull. I've done it too, where you just rake and you rake and you rake,
Right.
and the bull's like screaming at you, but you're just raking and raking,
Yep.
and you don't respond.
For sure. Exactly. And even throwing in, so when I get in, a lot of times if I can't quite see a bull, when I do get in some timbery stuff or some tree stuff, what I actually found to work, it was a smaller 5-point, but he was still a good bull. I was in there and I couldn't bring him. I had nowhere to go. So I was right at the edge of the timber. And so there was like 2 patches that we were in. There's an opening in between us. And I got right to the edge of it and couldn't get him to go. So I stepped behind a tree and I took a water bottle.
And sounds, and you can add that to the raking and then all the bugling and the calling. It just sounded like a whole bunch of elk down by the water.
Having a party down there, and it did it. It went from, midday for 2 days. We had nothing going on.
No action.
Bugles, no action to fired up quick.
Elk
It took us
running
a long time,
everywhere,
but
chasing everywhere. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. That's what everybody dreams of is.
Called in bulls.
Yeah.
No question.
Yep, exactly.
So they hung up, where we were at early season, they hung up somewhat, but Ben and I were able to ghost in close.
Yeah.
And you were probably 500 yards, 400 yards from those elk. And we were 200 yards from those elk. And yet they were streaming past us down this corridor. And all we had to do, it was all tricky because it was so early season, but what worked really well, getting in the bottom of those canyons.
Right.
Because when you're near that bottom, if you can draw the elk at least down there, our wind just blew down canyon in our face.
Exactly.
That made it really doable.
And that's for elk. That's like first and foremost.
'Cause
you won't fool an elk's nose.
No. So let's talk about setup, because I would say calling, that's a lot. In fact, there's quite a few guys who are good at calling.
Yep.
But, the killing has to combine with being a good caller combined with setup.
Yeah.
Like, describe a setup.
So, and we've talked on our previous podcasts and stuff. I haven't been the fortunate guy to have a good caller sit back, draw the elk past me. I haven't had ever that situation really.
Yeah.
But for me helping a lot of other guys or hunting with them, I can sit back or even be pretty close to them, even 20 yards, 15 yards from them. I'm able to sit back and kind of see what's going on. I can be far enough away that I can rake, make movement. And that's the big thing too, is usually, especially when I'm in close, even if it's just sticks in my pocket, I'm always breaking sticks, making noise. And I think a lot of guys, too, when they get in fairly close, as long as you're not making jerky movements, quick movements, elk make noise.
Yeah,
they are loud. And I think a lot of guys, they'll sit back and they'll get super quiet, but they'll still cow call and stuff, but they don't make any other noise. And it's like,
right.
Those bulls will be like, I hear cow sounds, but I hear nothing else.
Yeah, I hear a herd of like 7, 10, 15 cows, and yet I don't hear them doing anything else.
Right.
Yeah, it's sort of just a sixth sense, I think. Yep. I don't even think they just go, that doesn't sound right.
Yep. And so setup all depends on situation. So if we break it down, say you have a smaller bull that got ran off out of a herd, kind of a satellite bull, you can set up, and I've had it happen a lot. You can make just a few cow sounds.
Yeah.
And those bulls are like, well, there's cows down here, and I got ran out of this herd. Right. I'm going to head down there. And they'll come in on a string. And sometimes you'll even get a big bull do that because he got ran off by another bull,
Yeah.
And you can bring him right in usually. Yeah. Just by basic
timing,
cow sounds, timing is a lot of it. Where if you're in thicker timber and stuff like that, which I haven't had a ton of experience with, but you can sit back and, have a guy ahead of you, call, rake, some bugles, things like that. And if you get that bull that wants to challenge you, you can really get him fired up.
Right.
But it all depends on the bull and his attitude.
Yeah.
Some bulls, they'll scream at you, but they never want to fight,
Yep.
Just like humans, you got your fighters and your lovers.
They're unique, man. Yep. I remember we were in Mount Emily once with Anthony, and he drew the tag. He'd waited 12 or 13 years or something, or 14 years to draw this tag. So it was pretty cool because, you put in that many years and you finally get your opportunity. It's a good unit in Oregon. And we got into all these elk, and we were calling elk day and night, and they were charging in some to the call. And one morning we spotted this bull across canyon from us. There was multiple herds, like 5 herds with herd bulls and cows, and we're glassing up all these elk, and we're trying to be selective because after all, this tag was like 12, 14 years to get.
Right.
So we're all pretty stoked. We're like, okay, we got a month here of September. So we're I don't remember how many days into this hunt we were, but we'd been there a while, and we spot a bull that just does this little soft and like not super loud bugle, and he's on. We pull up the spotter and we look, and from our naked eye, he looked pretty good. And we watch this bull, and he's a beast. He's just a cool bull. He's palmated like a moose.
Right, an old bull probably.
And the tops, especially the bull's tops, he had weak fronts and weak lower end, but the top was palmed like moose antlers. Just super unique, like flashy, and he looked old. He looked like he was regressing, kind of a bull. So we're watching this bull, and he's got a bunch of cows, but he's just sort of trotting around them, but he is not vocal. I assume because he's old for a reason.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't think he wants other bulls to challenge him, so he doesn't really want to tell him where he's at, and he's got a group. Plus, he knows that hunters can zero in on him if he talks, right? Just like they know when they bugle, they can attract wolves, just like they know they can attract hunters.
Yep.
They just throw caution to the wind because they're horny, This bull, though, was pretty wise and disciplined, it seemed. And we watched him on this open top in this little pocket. And it was an odd place to be because there was a busy highway road kind of above him and then one below him. And he's in this little pocket. And then there were elk all these other places, and they were screaming and fighting each other and yelling, and we watched all morning. And, Anthony saw this bull, and he's like, I want that bull. But we just couldn't get him to be vocal. We tried to make a game plan. We went in on him a couple of times, couldn't make it happen. Then we glassed him one morning. We realized, we weren't going to be able to call this bull in because he kind of just would circle up his cows and just kind of sneak into the trees. When all the other elk would be vocal for another hour, he's already tucked in and hidden. The sun barely comes up. He's gone. This bull was old and he was wise. We found him the first time because of that faint bugle, but we ended up finding him bedded one day in the morning, just in the really thick stuff. But there just happened to be a logging road, that old logging road that's totally grown over, but nonetheless was a pretty decent trail to walk in, even though there was waist tall trees throughout it. We ended up going, well, he's only 20 yards off the road. We're a whole canyon away. So we got on that road, walked in all the way as stealthily as we could, got to the spot where we knew.
Now, is this an archery hunt or rifle
archery hunt?
Archery.
We get into the spot and we're on that thing, and boom, we look over and he's 20 yards below us, just like he was, bedded. But there's no shot. Right. It's too thick. But here we are. We're 20 yards, 20, 30, 25 yards, something from this stud bull. And you could see his tops and those palm antlers. And I remember just going, whoa, this is a beautiful. Right, you're never going to, this is one of those rare bulls that he didn't score super high. I think he, all said and done, he was like 330s, 340s,
right,
something like that.
Just super unique.
But yeah, just worth every, just because of his unique character. He was cool. And we ended up having to wait for him to stand, and he stood, which seems like an eternity. You're there like, I think we were there like an hour, something like that. Yeah. Bull finally just stands up on his own. Whole time you're praying, like, keep the wind in our favor. Yeah. And it's close. Like, you know how it is.
Oh,
just
anything.
Yeah. He stands up in that window, and Anthony had come to full draws. He was standing up, and he snuck it through some trees, and that was it. But every bull is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Right? And how you hunt it is a little bit different. I think it's cool to target a single bull and then like make that your challenge. But it is interesting to see how each of them respond. I've not had a ton of luck calling in really big bulls.
Right.
And so I don't use calling to really call in a bull. Now, if you're hunting the Oregon coast or someplace thick, like we were even this last year,
right,
you can't spot and stalk. You can't target because
totally
it's too thick.
Different.
Yeah. So you're just, your calling is kind of one of the best ways to do it. That, or someone calls from a distance and keeps a bull talking and you move in on it. But you're not necessarily, you don't know what you're moving in on. Mm-hmm. Where in open country you do.
And that's the thing is open country, you can see for miles. So I don't even use a lot of location bugles. Mm-hmm. I don't, like last year with my bull, I made
all this wasted calling talent.
I know. Last year with my bull, I think I called like 6 or 8 times, and that was literally to get from where I was with it, and I was behind the decoy initially. I called just to get around this open slide shell rock face, and it was snowing, raining, so it was kind of foggy. But I got in 61 yards from a really nice 6x7, or 6 point, and later on. Another 6 point and that bull, and then a 6x7 that I had been on the weekend before. They all got to mingling, fighting, and of course I missed the big 6 point at 40 yards. And I was just dumb, but I didn't call once I got in that range, like within 100 yards.
Yeah,
I was there for about 3.5, 4 hours, just basically shadowing these elk, trying to get my shot opportunity, sneaking in, being stealthy.
Yeah,
and I didn't make a single sound. And those elk were rutting just crazy back and forth, and
it's interesting. You kind of have to read a bull. I remember one time I had a bull, some cows spooked and they were running away. This is in Hell's Canyon, big open country.
Right.
I put my bow over my head like it was a pair of antlers, set of antlers. And I just kept calling as I walked down the hill toward the bull. And I was about 100 yards out and it was over. I was like, well, I'll just see if I can distract him and get to within 50 yards.
Yeah.
So I had the rangefinder out, and sure enough, I got down there and ranged him, and he's screaming at me, and he would run 20 yards, and I would go 30 yards. Mm-hmm. And he would run 15 yards, and I would go 5 yards. And I was pushing him, but he couldn't stop himself. He had to turn and challenge me and scream at me, and I'd scream at him, and I was kicking rocks, and I don't know what he thought. I'm in the wide open in the prairie, but I sound like an elk. I got horns kind of with my bow in there, and then I pull it down and he'd be like, what? And then I'd scream. And anyway, this was 7 or 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. Today I would kill him.
Right.
Then I missed. So it was all the adrenaline and the excitement. I kept getting close, and I got him ranged at 50, and I was like, and I wasn't the archer then that I am now either.
Right.
I didn't have the experience I just got buck fever. And I shot right over his back. I remember arrow flies over his back, and I was so discouraged but that technique, that worked.
Right.
That worked. It just bought me some time. And that's where I think elk calling can be hugely beneficial.
Right.
Having that skill, it's just one more tool in the kit that helps you get your bull. And you just use what you've got. You improvise, be creative.
Yep. And see, like me, I kind of have that in my back pocket. I more rely on my stalking ability.
Yeah.
You know, and
Me too.
over the last few years, I've really tried to perfect that, you know, and and just being quiet.
I feel like I have more control over the situation. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist on some things.
Right.
I'm a little anal retentive. I feel like I'm giving up control somewhat of what the outcome is gonna be when I betray my location, when I use calling, when I'm trying to stoke a bull up and get him to come in. When he doesn't know I'm there, I have full control. Right? I can back out when he doesn't know. I can pay attention to the wind.
Yep.
And it's all on me to be quiet and sneaky, which I'm good at. So I prefer to rely on my stealth and my sneakiness than to use my calling.
Yep.
Because I feel like I have more control over the outcome too, the whole stock and the outcome. And I'd say that's where I've shot my biggest bulls generally.
Yeah. And like, I think where I really started kind of focusing on that was 2015, I think.
Yeah.
And we had a whole bunch of elk where they were like, it's really, really scattered timber. So, I mean, you can see, even from a distance, you can see all these elk in there.
Yeah.
But it's just trees shadowed, and couldn't get anything to come out. And it was hot. It was middle of September.
Right.
And so I just slipped around, got the wind right. Same thing, kind of like a rock shell face. And I just slipped on my butt and focused on being quiet, sneaking. You know, I didn't cow call once. I didn't make any sound. And I got about 30, 35 yards, and I could see the elk, but I never had a shot. Once he started walking away, I was in the middle of him, had the wind right. I did cow call, I think, once or twice, just to turn that bull. And he turned around and walked right back up, and I shot him at 19 yards, you know.
Yeah.
But the whole time, and I was covered, but the whole time I slipped in there without making a peep, you know, and just was stealthy.
Yeah.
You know, and
one time I had snuck in on these elk that were running down canyon, and they were way up there, but I could see but 10 or so minutes, they were going to come across this bench. There was nowhere else to go. It was all cliffs below and above, and maybe a couple other spots, but generally I could see where they were going to funnel through this bench on this opposite mountainside. So I ran down this canyon and up the other side like a triathlete. And then I got in the bench, and I'm like, and I'm trying to get my breathing down. Right about then, the herd just starts funneling through. And it was hundreds of elk, literally, just coming through this gap. And they're walking by at 5 feet, 10 feet, 30 feet, you know, all around me. And I'm waiting and some of them are spooking because they're smelling me, but they're just so intense. Something else was pushing them. I didn't know what. And they go on through, and I'm sitting there. It's one of the coolest things I've ever experienced. And I'm sitting there, and then I hear, and this is after probably 100 head have already walked past me. And sure enough, this big mountain lion, well, I say it was big. Anthony and Ben said it was small, but they never saw it.
Right.
They said they saw the tracks, and they're like, it's a little lion. I'm like, to this day, I'm going to say it's big. It's a big lion. You saw different tracks, but the mountain lion comes right through, and he's panting heavily. I go to full draw. He's going to pass by me broadside about 40 yards. I come to full draw, and he just whips around and comes straight at me. And crouched down low. His haunches are shifting, his tail's going, and he's probably, 30 yards or so. And I can tell he's going to jump. Like he must assume, he doesn't know, right? He just saw the movement. And I just I don't know, I blacked out. The arrow went off. I think I got the pin somewhere in the vicinity, and boom, the arrow goes, target panic, whatever. Arrow goes right past his ear and hits in the dirt because he's straight on. And he's on a slope. And then he spins. First, he sat there like a statue. It hit the dirt, and he didn't move. And I was like, oh, that's not good. That's not good. Like if an arrow passes within inches of your ear, you would think that you'd jump sideways or hit the ground behind you. No, didn't even flinch like a statue. So I was like, oh, I'm dead. And then it was like 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, which feels like an eternity.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And then
especially the mountain lion.
Whipped around and ran off. And then I kicked myself because I missed. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, that sucks. And I had a radio, and I radio Ben Anthony. Hey, guys, dude, there was a mountain lion right here on the hill. And I look up, and I've been waiting for this moment the whole time. This big old 6x6 bull comes walking out. And he's a big bull, like a nice bull. Big old white tips, chocolate horns. He looks at me. He's like 50 yards out, and he just picks his head up because I'm talking. So he was him and the mountain lion were like on like
Side by side, kind
real.
of.
They're 50 yards apart because this
Right.
whole thing happens, and he's walking up and he's breathing heavy, tongue out. You know, a bull elk has to carry all his muscle, all his weight, all his neck, and he has to carry that big rack of antlers. He just can't keep up with those cows running those long distances. I don't know if they even try, you know, after a while. So he's bringing up the rear, but he's really far behind him, which I assumed would be the case. I mean, I was between a bull and some cows. That was a great place to be.
Yeah, exactly.
But there I am, you know, in the excitement, opening my big mouth into a radio, and the bull looks at me, and I look at the bull while I'm talking, and I turn off the radio, and he turns around and walks off. So right then, mew, 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 mew. I do all the cow calls. He stops, turns around, and walks straight toward me. I crouch down. He just walks. I come to full draw. He's literally, 15 feet maybe. And in the excitement, I put the pin on him, and my arrow is actually in front of a tree branch, which I didn't see because there's lots of trees.
Right.
It's like 2 inches away from that branch. And when I shoot, the arrow hits the tree branch and just ricochets into his antlers. He's so close, I could just spit on him, you know. So, and I blew it, and he ran off because that's what happens when you're a new hunter and you're caught up in buck fever and all these things are happening. And I just blacked out again. Like this time I didn't black out, but I distinctly remember thinking there's a lot of trees in the way. And if I just move 4 inches further, there's no way I can hit anything. But the bull, when I cow called to stop him, he looked at me and I thought, well, I was so anxious to shoot, get the arrow off, get this pressure situation to end, that I didn't hold out just a few seconds longer to clear 3. If I moved 3 or 4 inches, he wouldn't have moved. He was like, what is that? And it didn't matter because I needed to, regardless, to really ensure I was making a good shot.
What does Joel Turner say? Most guys shoot half a second or
a second before they should.
Yep.
And that's what happened. And so he whirled off. But if I wasn't able to cow call, I didn't have that in my toolkit, didn't have a reed in my mouth.
Yep. And that's what I love about a diaphragm and being able to use a diaphragm is it's always accessible. You have it in your mouth when you're full draw, need to stop a bull. And that's another thing too is, you get a bull coming through timber or something, you have a short window. Yeah. A lot of times you can hit them really hard with a deep hard cow call, and you can get them to stop in that window, But having
that killed me this year. I did, again, giving yourself away.
Yeah.
I had a big bull, in September, rutting these cows. He was glunking hardcore. I was so jacked.
Oh, yeah.
I told you about this.
Oh, yeah.
Running in circles in this meadow. When I say meadow, it was no bigger than this little room. You're talking
like 20 feet,
30 by 30 yards.
Right.
And there's cows all over, and he's just running in circles in this meadow. He's jumping logs, and when I say meadow, it's really an open spot in a forest.
Right.
And he's glunking, and he's going nuts. He's chasing cow. He's checking cow, and he is just amped. He's bugling, glunking, going in circles. And there is about 15, 20 feet of thick brush, and then I'm at the edge of that opening, and there's no obstructions. But there's a little hallway where if that bull stopped in that hallway, I could shoot down the hallway, and I had a 15, 20-yard shot. Right? So I decided, no, I'm going to make my way through that brush and the wall, and I'm going to get to the edge of the clearing, and then I'm going to shoot. But then the bull just kept running around, coming around, and I'm making my way down that corridor. I could see him coming once, and I thought, well, if I just do a harsh cow call when he's right in that corridor, opening in the corridor, I'll smoke him. So I come to full draw as he's coming by, and I'm like, "Meow," and I cow call, and he don't care. "Meow," and I cow call again. Every other elk in the opening and in the brush all looked at me, but the horny bull, he was glunking, head down, breathing hard, and it just, how they are.
Yeah.
Sometimes that stops them, and sometimes they don't care.
Exactly.
And by doing that call, I alerted every other elk there, and he ran, and he stopped, but he stopped like, what's everybody looking around at? But he stopped not where I needed him to be.
Yeah.
And then all these elk are looking at me. I'm at full draw. I got no bull in my sights now. And now I got to hold. I'm holding, and I'm like, okay, I got to let down. and everything is frozen now. They're looking right at me.
They know.
They know. I'm right in there. I'm like 20 yards, 15 feet from some of these things. So sure enough, I let down and they all bolt. It's over. It's like, man, had I just waited till I got to the opening, another like 10 feet, really,
Right.
I could have drawn on my own terms, and I could have moved while they're all distracted. And when that bull stopped on its own naturally, which he did every now and then, I could have smoked him without ever letting him know I was there, without ever doing a single cow call.
Right. And I think a lot of guys do too get anxious. Impatient. What I've also had work, like calling for a friend or something like that. So I was hunting with a buddy in Oregon. I wasn't hunting, but I was at work up there with him, and so I was just calling for him. And super thick. And so I start calling. This bull's kind of bugling, but he's not a lot. And so I just kept cow calling. I wanted to bugle, but I'm like, nope, just keep cow calling. And so I did that for probably 30 minutes. Before you know it, that bull comes through, and buddy shot and ended up missing that bull. But just that consistent cow calling,
wearing him down.
Even as a good elk caller and somewhat experienced, I still wanted to bugle. I mean, everybody wants to bugle, and I kept telling myself, don't, just cow call.
And why not? Because you watch all these hunting videos, and everybody says, be aggressive, bugle. Right. My experience has been that usually makes them round up and leave.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it takes, this perfect moment. I feel like most of the time I can wear them down with cow calls over and over and over again until they're finally be like, fine, I'm just going to waltz over here and check real quick.
Right. And I think,
like, why didn't you bugle?
I think a lot, because one, I knew he wasn't a very big bull. So I know if I threw out a challenge bugle or something, he might just stay away. Like, man, I'm a little
do the
guy.
opposite.
See ya. And I think with a lot of the bigger bulls and stuff is, especially in darker timber and more foresty areas, is those guys will find those bulls that one bull, it might take 15.
Yeah,
but they find that one bull that wants to play. You know? And it can be, obviously, Jason and Corey and all those guys are very successful with that.
Yeah, Corey Jacobson, he'll say, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to try to find that bull that wants to play. If he doesn't want to play, I'll go find a different one. Right. I will say this, too. I also watched Corey pull in elk that none of us could pull in.
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, there is more to it than just an odds game.
Yes.
The same bull that we tried to call in off this hill, I watched Corey call into 60 yards. A guy who'd won a hunt through Mountain Ops was on this hunt with us, and it was just too far for him to shoot. But that bull stood there like, shoot me at 60 yards for 5 minutes.
Right.
55, 60 yards. And this gentleman needed like a 20, 25 yard shot to feel comfortable. So, good on him for not forcing a shot that he knew was outside of his skill set. But I tried to call those bulls, and I tried to copy Corey as well. And Corey repeatedly did that. This wasn't the only time. He managed to coax in some elk that I couldn't. It's not to say I didn't pull in some elk too, and we did, and we have. But I swear Corey can do it every day when I might pull it off every third day.
You just wore that bull out, and he finally came in. Corey started calling down.
That's right. He just took advantage of all the work I laid down.
Yeah, exactly. What I've found, especially in the open country, is, like we talked about earlier, those bulls will scream their heads off.
Yeah.
But they just continually will keep moving and moving.
It also depends on what excites you and what you like. I've had this discussion with Corey. Corey likes calling elk in. He doesn't want to sneak up on him.
Right.
He doesn't want to spot and stalk him.
Yep.
I like sneaking through the woods in my stockisons.
Right.
I like following him behind. I like, looking all the directions. And I like being that ninja and just shadowing that group.
Yeah.
I like that. I feel deadly. With the calling, I don't have the same feeling. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, it's awesome when you call a bull and he comes in charging and he's ready for a fight and his whites of his eyes, he's just rolling his eyes back. But I would say that I still prefer the feeling of being stealthy, undetected in the woods.
Right. And I think, just like this year on my board, I guess last year on my bull, it really turned into that. And I still get excited, but I don't get like super amped up with elk, I don't, but I've also never killed a real big bull either. I've got that bull that's just over 300, but I've killed a lot of elk. And so this year I'm really going to focus on, and I have my stockisons too, last year it was take the boot, or the previous years always been take the boot off. And we don't have a lot of cactus and stuff. We have steep terrain, rocks, things like that. But I'm the same with you. I love being able to just go in there undetected.
Yeah.
You know, and
Well, both you and I took coos deer this year in Arizona.
yeah.
We both like that all day
Right.
stalk, the feeling
It's
of,
draining.
but it's so cool.
It's so rewarding. And I think
It takes patience.
Just like on that coos deer, when I shot that buck this
Mm-hmm.
year, maybe because of the size of him, I don't know, but we've talked about it. I've never been that jacked on an animal. And I don't know if it's because
Right.
all day long I spent, turned out to be like a 9-hour stalk,
Right,
you know?
right. No, you put all the pieces together just right. If you don't do that, you're not taking a coos deer.
Right.
Yeah.
And it just, my adrenaline, man. I've never had to be in that position to where your legs are shaking so bad you have to sit down.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a good elk discussion. I hope everyone listening enjoyed it. If you got some questions, leave us comments on the YouTube video. That's always nice.
Yep.
DM us on Instagram. I respond to that often. Send us an email. Go to briancall.com. Support us by going out there and subscribing to the newsletter. Support us by using the code GRITTY at Mountain Ops to save if you got some orders and products you want to get Mountain Ops. Also, support our other partners. Heather's Choice, backcountry food. Get some packaroons, salmon chowder, meals, entrees, some breakfasts. You get 15% off there when you use the code GRITTY. Use the code GRITTY at Sissy Sticks to get yourself some sweet trekking poles. Use the code GRITTY at Valkyrie Arrows to save 5% off on Blood Eagle broadheads or an arrow system. Use the code GRITTY at Seek Outside to get yourself a sweet backcountry shelter. 5% savings there using the code GRITTY. My favorite shelter over there, you should look it up, is the Dyneema Cuban Fiber. It's a giant teepee, weighs 1.5 pounds.
Yep.
It's pretty tough to beat, and the stove is right around 1.5 pounds as well for the new U-turn stove, which is a genius titanium design. It's hard to beat, and if you're on a budget, because that shelter's about $1,000,
Right.
it's so much material, and the Dyneema is really space age kind of stuff, fabric. But if you are on a budget, the Silex is a great shelter.
Yep.
Sil nylon, it weighs 1.5 pounds as well, and you can get it with a stove jack, titanium stove, and it is a perfect one-man shelter, sub 3 pounds with a stove, room for you and your gear, early or late season. It's a great shelter, and that shelter is like $200.
Yeah.
So the other one, if you are hunting mostly in September, if you don't need a stove, the Eolus is another shelter. 2 guys, super comfortable, your gear. I would check that out too. So that's at Seek Outside. Graxaw game bags also. They have sweet game bags. These are for you backcountry hunting guys. It's for meat only bags, deboned meat, but it's a 6-ounce set of bags that'll pack out a whole elk. So you're talking about a little 6-ounce set of bags, and they're no bigger than a pop can, compressed. So they're not taking up a lot of space in your bag either. And they're stout little meat bags, perfect for backcountry hunting. I love the bags. So go to graxaw.com to check those out. All these links are in our description field of the YouTube videos. So you can always check that out there, or go to our website, which is briancall.com. And you can find all our podcasts there and get to the YouTube videos there. Every time you guys use the codes, it helps us keep the show going. If you like our content, you like our films, support us by shopping with our partners. Thanks for tuning in, and stay gritty.